It was a cold morning in November when Sarah first realized something was terribly wrong. The air was thick with an eerie stillness. The cat that hangs in the space before the world fully wakes up. The sun, a pale smear behind the clouds, cast long shadows across the streets. In the quiet of the house, Sarah stood by the kitchen window, her coffee cup forgotten in her hand, eyes glued to the empty driveway. Where is she? She muttered under her breath, though the words were more to herself than anyone else. Her daughter, Emily, was late, again at 11 years old. Emily had always been independent, often staying out with her friends or taking long walks in the park. But this was different. She'd promised to be home before dark, and yet the hours ticked by, and there was no sign of her. Sarah's thoughts began to spiral, a nagging sense of dread creeping over her like a cold mist. She picked up the phone and dialed Martin's number. Her husband had been distant lately, emotionally absent, as though a veil had settled between them. They hadn't spoken much in the past few weeks, but that didn't stop her from trying. The phone rang for what seemed like an eternity before he answered. Sarah, his voice was low, distracted, as if he had just woken up. Have you seen Emily? She asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. She's not back yet, and she said she would be. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I haven't seen her, Martin replied. His tone clipped. She probably got caught up with her friends. Don't worry. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She could hear the faint sound of a TV in the background, the flicker of static cutting through the silence. He was watching something, and it sounded like a game. He wasn't even listening. Martin, she said sharply. This isn't like her. What if something happened? Calm down, he snapped. You're always overacting. She's fine. Just give her some time. Sarah wanted to argue, but she felt herself grow cold, a sinking feeling in her stomach. I'll call the school, she said, hemming up before he could respond. She stepped out of the house and into the driveway, her breath coming in short, anxious bursts. She dialed Emily's school number and waited for the automated voice to guide her through the steps to reach the front desk. When she finally got through, her voice was almost frantic. Hello, I'm Sarah Moore, Emily's mother. Is she still at school? There was a brief moment of silence before the receptionist's voice came through the line. Mrs. Moore, Emily left school over an hour ago. She sent out early for an appointment. I'm afraid I don't have any other information. An appointment? Sarah felt her chest tighten. Emily hadn't mentioned any appointment. Who did she live with? I'm sorry, Mrs. Moore, I don't have that information, but I can check with her teacher if you'd like. No, Sarah said quickly. That's okay. Thank you. Her mind raced as she disconnected the call. She walked back into the house and glanced at the clock on the wall. It had been almost 3 hours since Emily should have been home. The rational part of her brain told her to wait, to give her daughter more time. But the mother in her, the woman who had spent every waking moment nurturing and loving this girl, felt something much darker take root inside her. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long streaks of amber across the sky, Sarah felt a sudden surge of panic. She grabbed her coat and rushed out of the house. She needed to find Emily, needed to see with her own eyes that she was safe. The street was unusually quiet, the only sounds being the crunch of fallen leaves beneath her boots and the distant hum of traffic. Sarah's mind raced as she made her way to the park, the place where Emily loved to go after school. She'd been there countless times before, running through the field, laughing with her friends. But today, the park felt different, darker. The tall oak trees loomed overhead, their branches bare and twisted like skeletal hands reaching out from the ground. The wind had picked up, swirling the leaves in erratic circles. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she approached the park entrance, her eyes scanning the empty playground and the surrounding benches. Emily, she called, her voice trembling. Emily, where are you? There was no answer, just the rustling of wind in the trees. Sarah hesitated for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. What was she supposed to do now? Her eyes darted around, desperate for some sign of her daughter. She walked deeper into the park, her steps growing more frantic with each passing second. And then, just as she was about to turn back, she saw it, a figure standing near the edge of the park, just beyond the small bridge that led to the forest. It was a man, tall and thin, his silhouette obscured by the evening shadows. He was facing away from her, his back straight, motionless. Something about the scene made Sarah's skin crawl, but it wasn't until he turned slightly that she saw the unmistakable blue jacket, Emily's jacket. Emily, Sarah's voice cut in her throat. The man turned fully, revealing his face. He was older, with dark hair that had started to thin at the temples, a rough, unshaven jaw. But it wasn't the man that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was the girl standing next to him. Emily. She was there, standing at his side, her eyes wide with something between fear and confusion. She didn't look at Sarah. Instead, she stared at the ground, her small hands clenched tightly by her sides. Emily, Sarah shouted, rushing forward. What are you doing here? The man didn't speak. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing there. As Sarah approached, she reached out, her hand trembling as she touched her daughter's shoulder. Emily, what's going on? She whispered, her heart breaking at the sight of her daughter's blank expression. Emily finally looked up, her eyes empty, as though the girl standing before her was no longer the same. Mom, I don't know, she stammered. He said he would help me find you. Who is he? Sarah asked, panic rising in her chest. But before Emily could answer, the man disappeared into the shadows, vanishing like a ghost. Back at home, Sarah's mind raced. The moment she stepped through the front door, the weight of the world seemed to come crashing down on her. Emily was there, but she was different. She had changed in some unfathomable way, and the terror that gripped Sarah's heart had only deepened. Martin was already at home, sitting in front of the TV again, as if nothing had happened. His eyes didn't even look up when Sarah entered, still glued to the screen. She's home, Sarah said quietly, her voice shaky. Martin grunted, not bothering to look at her. Good, glad she's safe. But Sarah knew, deep down, that things weren't safe. Not anymore. The stranger had been with Emily for too long, and whatever had happened in that moment, whatever connection they had, was something that Sarah couldn't understand. But she knew one thing for sure: her daughter was not the same, and that terrified her more than anything else. The air felt heavy, thick with tension. The once warm and familiar scent of coffee lingered in the kitchen, but Sarah found herself unable to stomach it anymore. Her fingers tightened around the mug in her hand as she stared at the clock on the wall. The tick of time so loud it seemed to echo through the empty house. It had been 3 years since Emily's disappearance, and though her daughter had returned home, her spirit fractured and her eyes forever changed, and nothing had been the same since. Every corner of the house, every room, felt empty now. Even when Martin was there, sitting in the same chair, eating the same meals, and watching the same meaningless television shows, there was an unspoken distance between them, something too wide to bridge. Sarah felt it most in the silence. The silence was deafening. It had settled between them slowly at first, a gap that widened as the days turned into months and the months bled into years. The marriage that once felt like a safe haven now felt like a cage. The warmth they had shared was gone, replaced by coldness that Sarah could no longer ignore. She glanced up, her eyes drifting toward the living room where Martin sat, his eyes glued to the television screen. He was watching yet another sports game, his fingers absent-mindedly tapping the armrest of the couch. The image of him, so detached, so far removed from the man she had married, made her stomach turn. Martin, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. She wasn't sure what she was about to say. For the past few weeks, it had all felt like a slow build-up, each day adding more weight to her chest. Today, she could no longer hold it in. He didn't turn to face her, just grunted in acknowledgement. What? His tone was flat, like he hadn't even registered that she was speaking to him. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. We need to talk. His eyes flickered toward her for a moment, then quickly returned to the game. No, Sarah, the game's on. Sarah's hands clenched, the mug shaking slightly in her grip. She couldn't believe this. How many times had she tried to talk to him? How many times had she reached out, only to be met with indifference? He was sitting there, watching a game, while their marriage was crumbling, their daughter was struggling, and everything around them was falling apart. Martin, this can't go on, she said, her voice more forceful this time. You and I, we. No, Sarah, he interrupted, louder this time. Can you see I'm watching the game? Just give it a last, will you? Her heart sank, but she pressed on, refusing to let him dismiss her again. I can't just ignore everything anymore. You've been distant, you've been absent. Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign that he might actually care. I need you to talk to me. I need to know if you still want this. She gestured between them. If you still want us. Martin let out a sharp laugh, the sound bitter. Want us? What's left of us? Sarah, what are we doing? We've been hanging on by a thread for years. Emily's back, but she's not the same. You're not the same. I'm not the same. You really want to keep pretending everything's fine? Sarah's throat tightened, but she refused to back down. I'm not pretending, but you are. Martin, you're shutting me out. You're shutting everyone out. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He rubbed a hand over his face, clearly frustrated. Maybe that's the only way I can handle it. Sarah, maybe that's the only way I can cope with everything that's happened. Everything, Sarah echoed, her voice writhing with a mix of anger and hurt. Is that all it is to you now? Just everything? Martin, this is our life. Our daughter is broken, and so are we. But you can't just walk away from it. You can't just give up. Martin took a step back, his eyes flashing with a mixture of guilt and anger. I haven't given up, Sarah. I've learned to live with it. To live with the fact that we lost our daughter for so long. That we've both lost something. I don't know what you want from me. Sarah felt a sharp pain in her chest. I want you, Martin. I want the man I married. I want us to fight for this. For a long moment, they stood in silence. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the TV, which now seemed like an alien presence. Martin looked away, unable to meet her gaze. I don't know if I can fight anymore, he said softly, almost to himself. The words struck Sarah like a physical blow. She staggered back, her breath catching in her throat. What are you saying? Her voice was barely a whisper, but it felt as if it carried the weight of the world. Are you saying you want to give up on us? On this family? Martin didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the floor, his eyes shadowed with something Sarah couldn't quite place. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost defeated. I don't know what else to do, Sarah. I've tried to move forward, but I feel like I'm stuck in the past, like we're both stuck, pretending that things are the same when they're not. His words hit Sarah harder than she expected. The raw honesty in his voice, the admission of his own struggle, made her feel as though a part of her heart was being ripped out. She had tried to ignore it, had tried to believe that if they just held on, everything would be okay. But now, hearing him say it out loud, she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I don't know how to fix this, Sarah whispered, more to herself than to him. I don't know if we can fix this. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. The air in the room felt suffocating, as if it was pressing in from all sides. Sarah fought back the tears that threatened to spill, but she knew, deep down, that they were both too far gone. Their marriage, like their daughter's broken spirit, had become something they couldn't repair. Finally, Martin broke the silence. Maybe it's time we face the truth, Sarah. Maybe we're not meant to be together anymore. Sarah's heart stopped, the finality in his words crashing over her like a wave. She felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath her, leaving her suspended in the void. What are you saying? She asked, her voice trembling. I'm saying, maybe we should divorce, Martin said quietly, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. It felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet. Divorce. The word seemed so cold, so final. It wasn't supposed to be like this. They had been through so much together, years of marriage, a daughter, dreams for the future. How had they gotten here? No, Sarah shook her head, unable to comprehend what was happening. You don't mean that. But the look on Martin's face, the weariness in his eyes, told her everything she needed to know. He meant it. This was the end. I think it's time, he said softly, almost apologetically. Sarah turned away, her back to him, her shoulders shaking with the weight of the decision she knew was coming. I can't do this, Martin. I can't just give up on everything, he sighed, a sound filled with regret. But there was nothing else to say. The night stretched on, empty and silent. Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. She had always thought they would get through this, that the love they had could withstand anything. But now, all she felt was the cold, suffocating emptiness of a love that had long since faded. Tomorrow, she would have to face the truth. Tomorrow, she would have to start the process of letting go, and she didn't know if she had the strength to do it. It was a week later when Sarah finally took the first step. She had spent days thinking, agonizing over what she should do, what she could possibly do to fix the crumbling fragments of her life. But after that night, after Martin's confession, the decision had become almost inevitable. There was no turning back. She had to file for divorce. The morning sun peeked through the blinds of the living room, casting soft golden light over the room where she sat. The house felt quiet, as it often did now. It had been silent for so long, save for the occasional murmur from the television and now the sound of Emily's soft footsteps down the hallway. But now, Sarah's every breath seemed to echo in the emptiness. She set her phone down on the coffee table, a finality to her action. The paperwork was already filled out. All it needed now was her signature. The words on the page seemed to blur before her eyes, a dull weight pressing against her chest. Divorce. She had never imagined she would be in this position, not after all they had been through. Before she could convince herself to second-guess her decision, there was a knock at the door. Sarah blinked, startled by the sound. Who could that be? Coming, she called, her voice catching in her throat. She walked toward the door, her steps hesitant, as though she wasn't sure whether she was ready for whatever lay on the other side. When she opened it, she found herself face to face with her best friend, Claire. Claire's eyes were wide with concern, her usual bright smile replaced by a more serious expression. I thought I'd find you here, Claire said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her voice was gentle but firm, like the comforting weight of a hand on your shoulder. Sarah nodded, stepping back to let Claire in. She hadn't expected anyone today. I was just going through some things, Sarah said, her voice trailing off. Claire glanced at the papers on the coffee table, recognizing what they were. You filed? She asked, her voice laced with sympathy. Sarah nodded again, this time feeling a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't told anyone yet. Not even her closest friends know the full extent of what had happened. But Claire had been there for her through everything, through Emily's disappearance, through the countless sleepless nights. Claire was the only one who knew the full story. I don't know what else to do, Claire, Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I can't keep living like this. I don't even know who Martin is anymore. He's not the man I married. Claire sat down beside Sarah on the couch, her hand resting gently on Sarah's. I know it's hard, she said softly. I know you're hurting, but you're doing what's best for you, and for Emily, too. You deserve to be happy, Sarah. You deserve someone who will actually be there for you. I thought that's what I had, Sarah muttered bitterly, her eyes welling up. I thought he would be there for me, but he's been so absent. It's like he's not even trying anymore. I'm just alone. Claire squeezed her hand, giving her a reassuring smile. You're not alone. Not anymore. You've got me. Sarah tried to smile back, but it was weak, more of an automatic reaction than anything genuine. The truth was, she felt like she was losing a part of herself in the process. Every time she thought about signing the divorce papers, it felt like she was tearing apart a piece of her soul. But as much as she loved Martin, the man she had married, the father of her child, it was clear now that they were no longer the same people. Suddenly, the phone buzzed, startling both women. Sarah glanced down at it, her heart dropping when she saw the name on the screen. Martin. Should I answer it? She asked Claire, her voice uncertain. Claire's gaze softened, but she didn't give any immediate response. You don't have to if you're not ready, she said gently, but you can't keep avoiding him forever. Take him a deep breath. Sarah pressed the answer button, the phone still heavy in her hand. She raised it to her ear. Hello, Sarah. Martin's voice came through, low and strained. We need to talk. Her pulse quickened, her stomach tightening at the sound of his voice. She could tell he was nervous, something in his tone that made her skin prickle. Something was wrong. About what? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. We've already talked, Martin. There's nothing more to say. I don't know what you think you know, he said, his voice tight, but there's something you need to understand. About me, about Mandy. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat at the mention of Mandy's name. She had heard that name before, a name from Martin's past, his high school girlfriend, the woman he had always claimed to be just a friend. But Sarah had always suspected there was more to it. What about her? Sarah asked, her voice low, almost inaudible. Martin hesitated, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them. When he spoke again, his words came out in a rush, as though he were desperate to get them out. I've been seeing her for the past few months. I'm sorry, Sarah, but I need you to know the truth. Sarah felt as though the floor had been ripped from beneath her. Her body went cold, and her vision blurred. Seeing him with Mandy, the betrayal hit her like a wave, crashing over her, leaving her gasping for air. You've been seeing her. Sarah's voice cracked, her grip on the phone tightening. After everything, after what we've been through, you've been seeing her behind my back. I never meant for it to happen, Sarah. It just did. Martin stammered. She reached out, and we started talking. I didn't think anything would come of it, but then things just, I don't know. It got complicated. Complicated, Sarah repeated, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. You're telling me that you've been having an affair with her for months, and you think it's just complicated? I'm sorry, Martin said, his voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah, but I think you deserve to know the truth. The truth. The words echoed in Sarah's mind, and all she could hear was the sharp pain of his betrayal, the cold realization that the man she had loved, the man she had tried so hard to save, had already given up on her. She didn't know how long they stayed on the phone. Time felt like it had slowed to a crawl. Finally, she spoke, her voice distant, hollow. I don't know who you are anymore, Martin. I don't think I ever really did, Sarah. He started again, but she hung up before he could say anything else. The room felt suffocating, then heavy, charged with the weight of his confession. She sat there, unable to move, unable to breathe. It was as if everything had frozen around her. The house, the world, leaving her trapped in the suffocating silence of betrayal. Claire was staring at her, her face pale with concern. Are you okay? She asked softly, though she already knew the answer. Sarah didn't respond right away. She couldn't. Instead, she picked up the divorce papers from the table, staring at them as though they were the only thing left in the world that made sense. Yeah, Sarah said after a long pause, her voice raw. I'm okay. But even as she spoke, she knew she wasn't, and maybe, for the first time, she realized that the woman she had once been was slipping away. That woman, the one who believed in love, who believed in second chances, was gone. The days after Martin's confession were a blur of emotions. Sarah had never felt so hollow. She had imagined many things: the pain of a breakup, the strain of a failed marriage, but never the cold, gnawing betrayal that now consumed her. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Martin's words rang in her ears. I've been seeing her. She had expected many things from Martin, but this betrayal was something she couldn't have prepared for. She had spent so much time fighting for him, for their family, for Emily. But now, everything felt like a lie. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting a soft glow over the room. Sarah had always loved mornings like this, when the house was quiet, when everything felt calm. But today, it felt like a cruel joke. She stood by the kitchen counter, making coffee. The sound of the coffee machine the only noise in the house. Her hands shook as she poured the hot liquid into a mug. Every little motion seemed to require more effort than she could master. She hadn't been able to sleep well the past few nights. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind returned to the conversation with Martin. Her phone buzzed suddenly, dragging her from her thoughts. Sarah stared at the screen, her stomach dropping when she saw the message from Emily. Mom, I need to talk to you when you're free. A deep sense of dread washed over Sarah. Emily hadn't been herself lately. but she hadn't expected this. After all, Emily had been through so much already: her disappearance, the trauma of her return, and now this new fracture in the family. Sarah's heart ached for her daughter. She couldn't imagine how all of this was affecting her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah responded quickly to Emily, "Of course, honey. I'll be here." A few minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door, followed by the familiar creak of the door opening. Emily stepped into the kitchen, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed as though she had been crying. "Hey, sweetheart," Sarah said, forcing a smile, but it felt hollow. "Come in. What's going on?" Emily hesitated before stepping fully into the room. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest as though she were trying to protect herself from something invisible. I don't know how to say this, Mom," Emily said, her voice cracking slightly. "I don't know what's going on with you and Dad, but I can't handle it anymore. The fighting, the tension, is making me feel like everything's falling apart again." Sarah's heart sank, the guilt hitting her in waves. Emily had already been through so much more than any child should ever have to endure, and now Sarah felt like she was failing her. She had promised herself that she would protect Emily from this mess, but it seemed impossible now. "Oh, honey," Sarah murmured, stepping toward her daughter. "I'm so sorry. You don't deserve any of this, but please, understand. I'm doing my best. I love you, and I'm trying to make things better." Emily wiped her eyes and nodded, but her face was full of uncertainty. "I know you're trying, Mom, but it's not enough. I don't know if you see it, but that's not the same anymore. And you're not the same either. We all just broken." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She knew Emily was right. She wasn't the same. How could she be, after everything that had happened? But hearing her daughter say it so plainly made the reality sink in even deeper. "We all struggling," Sarah admitted softly, her voice breaking. "I never wanted any of this for you, for us." Emily didn't say anything for a long moment. She just stared at Sarah, her eyes searching her mother's face as though trying to find some piece of the woman she used to know. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady, though filled with pain. "Are you and Dad getting a divorce?" Sarah flinched at the question, her breath catching in her throat. She had avoided saying the word out loud, but now that Emily had asked, she couldn't lie. "Not anymore. I don't know yet, sweetie," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's looking like that might happen." Emily bit her lip, her eyes flickering with confusion and sorrow. "Why, Mom? Why can't you work things out? I don't want to lose both of you." Sarah pulled her daughter into an embrace, holding her close. "I know, baby, I know, and I don't want to lose you either. But sometimes, people grow apart, sometimes, things change, and you can't fix what's broken no matter how hard you try. But it's not just you and Dad," Emily said softly, pulling back slightly to look at her mom. It's me too. Everything's changed since I came back. I'm not the same, Mom. I can't pretend anymore that everything's okay when it's not." Sarah felt her heart twist as she looked at her daughter. She had been so focused on her own pain that she hadn't fully realized how much Emily was hurting too. They were both in this together, struggling to find their way back from the darkness. "I don't know how to fix it, Emily," Sarah said quietly. "I don't even know if I can. But I want you to know that I will always be here for you. I'll always fight for you, no matter what happens." Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know, Mom. I know." The weight of everything, the divorce, the broken family, the struggles they were facing seemed to settle in the room like a dark cloud. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this. They had each other, and that had to count for something. Later that afternoon, Sarah found herself standing in front of the door to Martin's office, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She had to speak with him, had to figure out where they stood, what was left to salvage. But the thought of facing him again, after everything he had done, made her stomach churn. After a few moments, she pushed open the door, finding Martin hunched over his desk, papers scattered everywhere. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Sarah," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." "About what?" Sarah's tone was cold, but it didn't mask the tremor of emotion that lingered just beneath the surface. "About the divorce, about Mandy." Martin winced at the mention of her name, but he nodded. "Yes, we need to talk about all of it." Sarah crossed the room, standing a few feet away from his desk, her arms folded tightly across her chest. "You know, Martin, I've been thinking. You've had your chance to explain yourself. You've apologized, sort of, but there's nothing left to say. You've made your choice." He stood up suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. You have to believe that." "I don't know what to believe anymore," she sighed, her voice breaking slightly. "You've lied to me. You've betrayed me. And now you want me to just accept that." "I'm sorry," Martin said again, but it felt hollow. "I can't undo what I've done. I can't change the past. But I'm here, Sarah. I'm still here. And I want to try again. I want to fix things." Sarah shook her head, the tears finally spilling from her eyes. "You can't fix it, Martin. You've broken us beyond repair." She turned away before he could say anything else. The door slammed behind her, leaving Martin alone in the silence. The decision had been made. There was no going back now. The days following the confrontation with Martin were a whirlwind. Sarah had filed the divorce papers and started the painful process of disentangling her life from the man who had once been everything to her. Every time she looked around, the house seemed emptier, the silence louder. She had lived in this space for years, but now it felt like a ghost town. She and Emily spent most of their time in the living room or in the kitchen, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee or dinner at least gave some semblance of normalcy. But Sarah knew nothing felt normal anymore. Emily was quiet, withdrawn, her once bright eyes clouded with confusion and sadness. She had stopped asking questions about the divorce, but Sarah knew her daughter was still processing everything in her own way. Sarah had promised herself that she would be strong for Emily, if not for herself. But sometimes, the weight of the world felt too heavy to carry alone. One morning, after another sleepless night spent tossing and turning, Sarah decided she couldn't stay in the house any longer. She needed air. She needed space to think. It wasn't just about the divorce or Martin's betrayal anymore. It was about rediscovering herself, about healing the wounds that had festered too long. The cool morning breeze greeted her as she stepped outside. The neighborhood was still quiet, the early hours of the day offering a brief respite from the chaos that had consumed her life. She walked slowly down the street, her hands in the pockets of her jacket, her mind racing with a million thoughts. How had it all come to this? How had the man she had trusted with everything turned into someone unrecognizable? A few blocks away, she found herself at the park. It was one of the few places she could go where she didn't feel weighed down by the noise of the world, the peaceful rustling of leaves in the trees, the distant sound of children playing. It all felt like a temporary escape from the storm raging inside her. She sat down on a bench and let her gaze drift across the open space. Everything seemed so calm, so simple here, but Sarah knew it wouldn't last. The truth was, she had no idea what her life would look like from this point forward. The future felt uncertain, and that scared her more than she cared to admit. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. She looked down, seeing a text message from Claire. From Claire. "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Want to grab lunch today?" Sarah smiled faintly at the message. Claire had been a rock for her throughout this entire ordeal. They hadn't seen each other much since the divorce proceedings had started, but Sarah knew Claire was always there when she needed her. To Claire, "I'd love that. How about noon?" From Claire, "Perfect. I'll pick you up at your place." Sarah sat for a while longer, enjoying the peace of the park. She had always been a little afraid of solitude. It had always seemed like the silence would swallow her whole. But now, in this moment, she realized that silence wasn't her enemy. The real enemy had been the chaos of her life, the lies she had allowed to fester for so long. When noon rolled around, Claire pulled up in front of Sarah's house, the engine purring softly as she rolled down the window. "Hey there," Claire greeted, her smile wide as she stepped out of the car. "You ready to get out of here for a bit?" Sarah chuckled softly, her mood lifting just a little in the presence of her best friend. "Definitely. I need a break from all of this. Just need to breathe for a while." They drove to a cozy little cafe downtown, a place they had visited many times over the years. The moment they stepped inside, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee hit them, and Sarah felt a sense of comfort wash over her. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had sat in this cafe with Claire, laughing about everything and nothing at all. "How have you been?" Claire asked as they sat down at a small table by the window. "I mean, really, how are you holding up?" Sarah sighed, resting her hands on the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup absent-mindedly. "I'm okay, I guess. It's just been a lot, you know. I thought I could keep it together, but then everything just kind of collapsed. I don't even recognize my life anymore." Claire studied her for a moment, her expression softening with understanding. "I can't even imagine how hard this must be for you, Sarah, but I'm proud of you. You're doing what's best for you and for Emily. I know it's hard to see it now, but you're going to come out of this stronger." "I don't feel strong," Sarah confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I've lost everything. I've lost Martin. I've lost the future I thought we were building. And I've lost myself." Claire leaned in, her gaze intense. "But you haven't lost yourself, Sarah. You're just finding a new version of yourself. You've been through so much, but you're still here. You're still fighting, and that's something worth celebrating." Sarah couldn't help but smile, the weight of her grief lifting just a little. Claire always knew what to say, how to make her feel like she wasn't alone. "Thanks, Claire," Sarah said quietly. "I don't think I'd make it through this without you." The conversation shifted after that, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah allowed herself to relax. She wasn't thinking about the divorce or Martin's betrayal. She wasn't worrying about Emily's sadness or her own fear of the future. For just a little while, she could enjoy a moment of peace, with the comforting presence of her friend by her side. Later that afternoon, after lunch, Sarah returned home to find Emily sitting at the kitchen table, her homework spread out in front of her. Her daughter looked up as Sarah entered, her eyes tired but softer than they had been in days. "Hey, how was lunch?" Emily asked, trying to sound casual. "It was good," Sarah replied, sitting down across from her. "Just what I needed." Emily nodded but didn't speak for a while. Finally, she set down her pencil and looked at Sarah, her gaze serious. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about how things are broken. Sarah's heart tightened. You've been thinking about that? Emily shrugged, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her notebook. I don't like it, but I get it. I don't think things can go back to how they were, and I don't know what's going to happen next. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out what this new version of our family looks like. Emily, Sarah started, her voice catching in her throat. I don't know what the future holds either, but I promise you, no matter what, we'll get through it together. I'll always be here for you. Emily gave her a small, tired smile. I know, Mom. I know. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Sarah focused on getting through each day, managing her responsibilities at work, keeping up with Emily's school, and trying to piece together what was left of her life. But despite the exhaustion that seemed to hang over her, Sarah felt a flicker of hope begin to rise inside her. For the first time in months, she felt like she was slowly finding herself again. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah sat on the couch, the divorce papers spread out in front of her. She stared at them for a long time, her mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. She knew the path ahead would be difficult, but she was no longer afraid of it. She was done living in the shadow of the past. It was time to move forward, for herself, for Emily. With a deep breath, Sarah picked up the pen and signed the papers. This was her choice, her future, and as painful as it was, she knew she was finally taking control of her own life again. The days after Sarah signed the divorce papers were some of the longest of her life. She thought the hardest part was behind her, but now, it felt like a new battle had just begun. Her mind was constantly occupied with the task of rebuilding her life, but the truth was, she didn't know where to start. The past few weeks had left her drained, emotionally and physically. Still, the silence at home seemed to stretch longer with every passing hour. It was a Saturday morning when Sarah found herself staring out the window of her living room, watching the rain falling sheets against the glass. The dark clouds mirrored her mood perfectly, heavy, ominous, and a little suffocating. Emily had spent the night at her friend's house, giving Sarah the rare moment of solitude she so desperately needed. She hadn't realized how much she missed the quiet. It wasn't the same as before, though. There was no warmth, no comfort in the silence anymore. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the clock on the wall, surprised by the timing. She hadn't been expecting anyone. With a sigh, Sarah walked to the door and opened it, only to find Robert standing there, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his jacket. Hey, he greeted, giving her a small, reassuring smile. Hi, Sarah said, startled but relieved to see him. She stepped aside to let him in. What are you doing here? I wasn't expecting you today. Robert shrugged as he walked inside, his gaze flickering around the house. I know, but I figured you could use a little distraction. Mind if I hang out for a bit? Sarah's face softened. Robert had been her friend since high school. After the mess with Martin, he had been there for her more times than she could count. It was hard to imagine what she would have done without him. Of course, she replied, leading him into the living room. It's good to see you. Robert dropped onto the couch, glancing around the room, his expression thoughtful. You're not doing too much with the house, huh? Sarah followed him into the room, standing by the fireplace. No, I'm not ready for that. It still feels like he's just gone for a while, you know, like he is coming back. She paused, her throat tightening. But I know he's not. Robert nodded. Understanding? I get it. This place, it holds a lot of memories. But you're going to have to make it your own soon. Start fresh. It's the only way you get through this. Sarah took a deep breath, settling into the armchair. I know, it just feels so final, like the moment I change anything, it'll make it all too real. Like I'm erasing him from our lives entirely. You're not erasing him, Robert said gently, his eyes meeting hers. You're just moving on. You're not holding on to the past anymore. There was a long silence as Sarah processed his words. It wasn't that she didn't understand what he was saying. She did. But the idea of moving on, of really letting go of Martin, felt impossible. Her heart had been with him for so long, and the thought of completely severing the ties that had held them together for years felt like tearing something inside her apart. Thanks, she finally said, her voice a little thick. You always know what to say. Robert smiled, though there was an underlying sadness in his eyes. It's what friends are for. The conversation shifted after that, and the two of them spent the next hour talking about anything and everything. They reminisced about their high school days, laughed about old inside jokes, and even debated the latest TV shows. It was the kind of distraction Sarah needed, light, easy, and free of the weight of her current life. Eventually, the conversation turned back to her situation, and Robert grew more serious. I know you're trying to be strong for Emily, Robert began, his tone careful. But I've got to ask, how are you holding up? Are you okay? Sarah hesitated. She had told herself over and over again that she had to be strong for Emily, that everything she was doing was for her daughter's sake. But the truth was, Sarah had neglected her own feelings for so long that she didn't even know how to answer that question. I don't know, Sarah said softly. Some days I feel like I'm okay, like I can handle everything, that maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but other days, I just feel so lost, like I don't know who I am anymore. The person I was before all of this doesn't exist, and I'm not sure if I can find her again. Robert's gaze softened, and he leaned forward, his voice gentle. You don't have to have everything figured out, Sarah. You don't have to be okay all the time. You're allowed to feel everything you're feeling, no matter how messy it is. You're allowed to grieve. You've been through hell, and it's okay if you're not okay right now. Sarah swallowed hard, feeling tears sting at the corners of her eyes. I don't know how to do this alone, Robert. I've spent so many years building my life with Martin, and now I'm just lost. I don't even know where to start. And Emily, she needs me. I don't want to mess this up. You're not going to mess this up, Robert reassured her. You're doing everything you can, and you've already proven that you're stronger than you think. You'll find your way. You've got time to figure it out. She nodded slowly, letting his words settle in her mind. I hope so. Just then, the front door creaked open, and Emily's voice called out from the hallway. Mom, in here, sweetie. Sarah replied, rising to her feet as Emily stepped into the living room. Hey, Robert. Emily said with a small smile, her eyes still carrying the weight of everything that had happened over the past few weeks. What's going on? Just checking in on your mom, Robert replied with a wink. She's doing all right, but I thought she might need a little distraction. Emily looked at Sarah, her gaze softening. I'm glad you came over, Robert. We all need a little distraction. Robert chuckled. It's what I do best. For a moment, the three of them sat in comfortable silence. Sarah watched her daughter, noting the way Emily was trying to hold it all together. She was still struggling, but there was something stronger in her, a quiet resilience that Sarah admired. Emily had been through so much, and yet, she was still standing. How was your day, Em? Sarah asked, her voice light. It was okay, Emily replied, shrugging. We just watched a movie at Rachel's house and played some board games. It was fun, but it didn't really help. I just keep thinking about everything. Sarah reached out to her, her heart aching for her daughter. I know, honey, I know. We'll get through this together. Emily smiled faintly, sitting down beside her mom. I know, Mom. I just wish things were easier. Me too, Sarah whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. But we'll find a way, I promise. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Sarah found herself feeling oddly peaceful. It wasn't the kind of peace she had once known, but something different, something hard-earned. With Robert by her side and Emily at home, she didn't feel quite so alone in this broken world. The future was still uncertain, and there would be many more tough days ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a small, quiet hope stirring inside her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep moving forward. The days that followed felt like a blur for Sarah. The weight of the divorce had begun to feel like a distant memory, but the emotional residue lingered in the corners of her mind. Every so often, a thought would cross her mind about Martin, what he was doing, if he was thinking about Emily, if he had any regrets about what had happened between them. But she had learned to push those thoughts aside. She couldn't afford to dwell on the past anymore, not when the future was still so uncertain. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Sarah had just returned from picking Emily up from school and was preparing dinner when the phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something in her gut told her it was important. Hello, she answered, wiping her hands on the dish. Oh, is this Sarah Harris? The voice on the other end was deep and professional, yet oddly tense. Yes, this is she. Who is this? This is Detective Jameson with the police department. I need to speak with you about your husband, Martin Harris. Her breath caught in her throat. Martin, the name that had haunted her thoughts for months. Her heart skipped a beat. What about Martin? I'm afraid there's been a situation, the detective said, his voice lowering as though he was reluctant to share the news. I need you to come down to the station as soon as possible. It's about his whereabouts. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. What do you mean his whereabouts? Has something happened to him? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before the detective finally spoke again. I can't go into specifics right now, but we have reason to believe that Martin has been involved in something unsavory. Please come down to the station. The line went dead, and Sarah stood there in a daze, the phone still pressed against her ear. Her mind raced. What could this mean? What was going on with Martin? Why hadn't he come home or contacted her? Especially if something was happening. Her hands shook as she lowered the phone and tried to steady herself. This was the last thing she had expected. No, Emily's voice pulled Sarah back to reality. She turned around to see her daughter standing in the doorway of the kitchen, a frown on her face. Who was that? Sarah's thoughts swirled. She couldn't bear to tell Emily just yet, not without knowing more herself. But she also knew that if she didn't take action now, things could spiral further out of control. It was the police. Sweetheart, Sarah said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. They want me to come down to the station. There's something about your dad. I don't know all the details yet. Emily's face paled, and she stepped closer to her mom. What happened? Is Dad in trouble? I don't know, Sarah replied honestly, her voice trembling. But I have to go. I'll be back as soon as I can. Emily nodded, her face filled with a mix of confusion and fear. Do you want me to come with you? Sarah shook her head. No, honey, stay here, okay? It's going to be fine. I'll explain everything when I get back. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Okay, be careful. With that, Sarah grabbed her jacket and headed out the door. She couldn't shake the nagging sense of dread in the pit of her stomach as she drove to the police station. The thought of what this could mean for her family, for Emily, was almost too much to bear. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as the weight of the unknown pressed down on her. The police station was a cold, sterile place. Sarah parked in the lot and walked inside, her heels clicking against the tile floor. A uniformed officer at the front desk looked up at her as she approached, his expression neutral but professional. I'm Sarah Harris. I'm here to speak with Detective Jameson, she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Right this way, ma'am, the officer replied, standing up and leading her through the hallway. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as they passed a series of rooms, each door closed, each room filled with echoes of conversations she couldn't hear. The station was busy, but to her, it felt eerily quiet, as if the calm before a storm. When they reached the detective's office, the officer knocked lightly before opening the door. Detective Jameson was seated behind his desk, his face grim. He stood as they entered, offering a polite but firm handshake. Miss Harris, he greeted her. Please, have a seat. Sarah sat down, her legs trembling beneath her. She tried to steady her breath, but the anxiety was overwhelming. What had happened to Martin? Why was the police involved? She had so many questions, and the uncertainty was driving her mad. Detective, Sarah said, her voice tight. What's going on? What's happened to Martin? Jameson paused for a moment, gathering his words carefully. We've been investigating a stream of recent activities that involve your husband, Martin Harris. What I'm about to tell you is not easy to hear, but you deserve to know the truth. Sarah's stomach lurched. What activities? What truth? We have reason to believe that Martin has been involved in illegal activity, Jameson continued, his gaze never wavering. Specifically, he's been linked to a series of financial crimes, fraud, money laundering, and possibly worse. We've been tracking him for some time now, and based on the evidence we've gathered, we believe he's been hiding some very serious things from you. Sarah felt the room spin. The words felt like a punch to the gut. She had known that Martin had changed, but this was something she never could have imagined. Are you saying Martin's been lying to me? That he's been doing these things behind my back? Sarah's voice broke as she spoke, the weight of the betrayal settling on her chest. I'm afraid so, Detective Jameson replied, his voice soft but unwavering. There are indications that Martin has been involved with individuals who have connections to organized crime. He's been using his business dealings as a cover for these illegal activities, and now we're trying to locate him to understand the full extent of his involvement. Sarah's mind raced. Martin had always been a man who valued control, who presented himself as the ideal husband and father. The idea that he had been hiding something so dark and dangerous was unimaginable. But now, all the signs, his sudden disappearance, his lack of contact, were falling into place. What does this mean for me? For Emily? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Is he going to be arrested? We're working on it, but we're still in the early stages of the investigation, Jameson replied. At this point, I can't give you a definitive answer, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of what was happening. If you need any assistance, or if you have any information that could help our investigation, don't hesitate to contact us. Farah felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath her. The life she had spent years building, the life she thought was solid, was crumbling before her eyes. How had she not seen this coming? How had she been so blind? Thank you, Sarah said quietly, her voice shaking as she stood up. She felt as if she were walking through a fog, unable to grasp the reality of the situation. I'll contact you if I remember anything that could help, Detective Jameson nodded, his face softening with a look of sympathy. Take care of yourself, Miss Harris. We'll do everything we can to help you through this. Sarah drove home in a daze. The information she had just learned replayed in her mind like a broken record. She could barely wrap her head around the fact that the man she had loved for so many years, the father of her daughter, had been living a life filled with lies and deception. When she arrived home, Emily was sitting on the couch, her school bag resting beside her. She looked up when Sarah walked through the door, her eyes full of concern. Mom, what happened? Emily asked, standing up to approach her. Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't know how to tell her daughter that the man they had both loved was involved in crimes far darker than they could imagine. Emily, Sarah said finally, her voice breaking, I need to talk to you about your dad. We've just learned some things, some very serious things about him. The days following her conversation with Detective Jameson were a blur. The revelation about Martin's involvement in illegal activities left Sarah feeling as if her entire world had been upended. Every memory she had of him now felt tainted by the shadows of the lies he'd lived, and the trust she'd once held in him had shattered into countless pieces. She hadn't yet fully processed what this meant for her future, but one thing was clear: she had to protect herself and Emily from whatever was to come next. It was a few weeks later when Sarah finally felt the first stirrings of something like clarity. Life had forced her into this position, but slowly, she was starting to learn how to move forward, even when she didn't know exactly where forward was. The sun was setting as she sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the bills and letters that had piled up over the past few weeks. The silence in the house had become a constant companion, at once both soothing and suffocating. She hadn't heard from Martin since that day at the police station, and now that his whereabouts were still unknown, she had little choice but to keep moving forward without him. He had disappeared, and with his disappearance came the looming uncertainty that he might never return. "Mom," Emily's voice interrupted her thoughts. Sarah looked up to see her daughter standing in the doorway, her expression serious. Sarah put down the envelope she had been holding and smiled softly. "Hey, sweetie, what's up? Can we talk?" Emily asked, her tone hesitant. She had been quieter than usual lately, her teenage moodiness blending with the weight of everything that had happened over the past few months. Sarah could tell there was something on her daughter's mind that she needed to see. "Of course," Sarah replied, motioning for Emily to join her at the table. "Sit down. What's going on?" Emily took a deep breath before sitting down across from her. She stared at her hands for a moment before looking up at her mother. "I've been thinking a lot about that, and about everything that's happened." Her voice faltered slightly, but she pressed on. "I know you've been trying to keep it together for me, but I don't know how to feel about all of this. About him. I don't know if I should be angry at him or sad or just, I don't know." "Mom." Sarah's heart ached as she watched her daughter struggle. Emily was caught in a battle of her own emotions, trying to process the betrayal of the man who had once been her hero. She was so young to carry such a heavy burden. "I understand, honey," Sarah said softly, reaching across the table to take Emily's hand. "I've been feeling all those things too, but it's okay not to have all the answers. We're in this together, okay? We're allowed to feel whatever we feel, and it's okay if that changes every day." Emily nodded, though the sadness in her eyes didn't fade. I keep thinking about how we used to be a family, and now everything's different. He's gone, and we're just us. We are still family, Sarah said, her voice firm, though she felt a pang of sadness at the truth of those words. "We're just figuring out what that looks like now." "I know." Emily's voice was small, but she squeezed Sarah's hand in return. "I don't want to be mad at Dad. I really don't. I don't know how to forgive him for what he's done." "I don't have an answer for you, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her throat tight. "I don't know how to forgive him either. But what I do know is that we have each other, and that's enough for now. We'll figure it out." Emily looked down at her hands again, her fingers fiddling with the edge of the table. "Do you think he's ever coming back?" Sarah sighed, a knot forming in her chest. The truth was, she didn't know. She hadn't heard anything from the police about Martin's whereabouts, and while she had tried to move on, the uncertainty of it all gnawed at her. She didn't want to give Emily false hope, but she couldn't bring herself to crush it completely either. "I don't know," Sarah said finally, her voice quiet. "But if he does come back, I'll make sure we're ready to handle whatever that means. For now, we can't wait for him. We need to live our lives." Emily nodded slowly, and for the first time in weeks, a small, hopeful smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "You're right, I guess we have to move on." "Exactly," Sarah replied, "and you're not alone in this. I'm here, and so is Robert." The mention of Robert made Sarah feel something warm stir inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Robert had been there for her through the darkest parts of her journey. She couldn't deny that his presence had started to mean something more, though she had yet to fully acknowledge it. He was a constant source of support, and that comfort was something she couldn't take for granted. "Robert." Emily's eyebrows raised slightly at the mention of his name. "You mean the guy who's been hanging out with you lately? The one from high school?" "Yeah," Sarah said, her lips curving into a smile. "He's been a great friend. He's helped me more than you know." Emily's eyes softened. "I'm glad you have someone, Mom. I think you deserve someone who makes you happy." The conversation shifted after that, and Sarah spent the next few hours talking to Emily about everything from school to old memories of Martin. It was a release for both of them, a chance to process their emotions and try to make sense of the wreckage that had become their lives. As evening settled in, they moved into the living room to watch a movie. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of peace settle in her chest. Later that night, as Sarah sat on the porch with a glass of wine in hand, the weight of the day slowly began to lift. The house was quiet, save for the distant sound of traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. She leaned back in the chair, her eyes scanning the stars above, each one a tiny flicker of light in an otherwise dark sky. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the silence. She pulled it out and saw Robert's name on the screen. A smile tugged at her lips as she answered. "Hey, Robert," she greeted, her voice light. "Hey, Sarah, I was just thinking about you," Robert said, his tone warm and familiar. "How's everything going?" "It's getting there," Sarah replied, her voice softening. "Emily and I had a good talk tonight. I think we're both starting to accept that things are changing. It's not easy, but we're figuring it out." "I'm glad to hear that," Robert said. "I know it's been tough, but you're doing great." There was a pause on the other end, and Sarah could sense the hesitation in Robert's voice. "Hey, Sarah," he said quietly. "I've been meaning to tell you something." "What is it?" Sarah asked, her heart suddenly racing with anticipation. "I don't want to make things complicated, but I care about you. I think you know that. I've cared about you for a long time. I just didn't know how to say it. But now that you're starting to heal, I wanted you to know." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this, hadn't allowed herself to think about the possibility of anything beyond friendship with Robert. But now, hearing the honesty in his voice, she couldn't help but feel a warmth spread through her chest. "I care about you too, Robert," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly. I'm not sure where I am right now. I don't want to rush anything." "I understand," Robert said gently. "I just wanted you to know. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here." Sarah sat in the quiet of the night, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the path to finding them.